Okay, I'm not sure that anyone is going to show up. If you do, feel free to join. But since I didn't get the class recorded this morning, we had a classroom issue since we've moved out of our building. So I'm going to go ahead and just go over a couple things over the test that we covered. I won't actually pull up any specific ones from the online class unless you guys do come into the Hangout, and I will be glad to go over your test and we can check it out. So the first thing I want to do is go into Evernote and kind of show you the changes, or not the changes, the things that I added today when I was going through. And I'm going to make this text just a little bit larger in here. Before we cover chapter 10, I wanted to cover some more information about things that we've been doing in our Python scripts. And one question I know one student had was, why do we have to put this this app.main loop in our code? And I know this is really not a Python class, so I'm just answering some of these for students that were interested. Don't worry about it. It won't, it's not something that I want you to be tested on in the logic class. I just thought it was interesting to know what these different scripting things in Python do. So what this app main loop does, it means that each program will now loop indefinitely, waiting for events. So when you create your GUI interface window, for it to stay there and just keep running, you have to put this app.main loop at the bottom. Now, I'm not saying it won't work without it. I think some versions do. But in fact, in some of the tutorials that you'll see that I have this YouTube link to, I think it's the older version of Python, because they put, I think it says root.main loop. But anyway, this is an event-driven programming language. Python script is, which all object-oriented languages are event-driven. And what I mean by that is that something happens if you click a button, if you press a certain key. There's things that you can do that trigger a chunk of code, so to speak, or it's called an event handler. And another thing that I'm not sure how well I explained before is that we have to use that pack in our GUI interface in Python, and that simply packs it out to the screen. It makes it fit in anywhere it will. And that's why, if you recall, in that one program that we did in chapter 7, where we create our first GUI interface, and when you'd click on the button corrected, just keep a counter going over there to the left, because that's where it packed that particular display. But there are attributes, if you care about knowing them, that you can look at on this YouTube video that I have here, that I had students wanting to know how they could pack those objects horizontally, like the radio buttons. And the guy who does the tutorial here at this YouTube link shows you how to pack items on your screen horizontally. There's even one where you can do a grid layout. So if you're interested in knowing that much about Python, which if you're going to take the script language class, you might want to, but it's not a requirement. I just wanted to put that out there for students that were interested. Okay, so now for today, what we covered, there was 3 different versions of the answer to the test. And this one used what most students, the majority of the students did, is that they created the 5 individual entry fields for the GPA. Because if you remember, in the actual, let me get this open, in the actual document, test 4, I told you here that, let me change the view to draft mode here. Okay, so what I told you to do was the same problem that you did in test 2, where you were to read in 5 GPAs and pass the average into a function named display message, which from that average you would determine whether the student was on Dean's List, academic probation, or if they fell in the middle and did not get a message. And then I told you to create a GUI that had the title, student grade report, the student's name, that they would enter, radio buttons with the following classifications, then a field to enter a GPA, then click a button and store it in an array. So this program, I gave you the option. You could do 5 entry fields, which was easier for some students. I had one, I think only one, maybe a couple of students that stored it in an array with a button, and we're going to look at one of those. Then read them into an array and calculate the average, pass it into the display message function, the same function from the last test. So even if you don't use any other functions, you should use a function for display message. When the user clicks the message button, the function, excuse me, the function display message is called and displays to the screen the message. And you could, most students, what they did, they just packed that message at the bottom of their GUI interface. So it showed their GUI screen or window. Use the button click event handler from chapter 7 problem. So you could use that button click that when you clicked message, it would go, when they clicked message, they would go in and there would be a function that would do the test to see which message. I don't think anyone that I'm showing you actually did that, and that'll probably be something that I'll have you do on the final. Then you would click the save button and it should write the following to a file named grades.txt. Student name, classification, 5 GPAs, the average, and the message. So, and what I was telling you is instead of pseudocode, what most students did is they documented their program. And I also gave you a picture of the GUI screen. So we're going to look at this one, which was the most common way, the test for multiple GPA, and go over it. Let's see. Okay, this one, open with idle, and it may already be. Okay, so in this one, actually this line of code doesn't need to be there. All right, so what this program actually does, part of it is done the way it should be done according to the instructions. And actually the student that did this one, I've added a couple things or changed a couple things, but he said all he really did was take his project 4 and just change variable names and so forth. And that's what I really intended for you to do, is if you understood project 4, then this problem shouldn't have been much different. So what we did is in this one, he of course imported the library TK enter, and then he defined a function, his function save, and it's this long. Now, where the program actually starts executing is right here, app equals TK. So he sets up the TK library, app title, because that's what I requested, student grade report. Then this is the code that will create the name onto the screen, the label, and then it will take that and pack it, which means it'll place it on the screen. Size equals string variable, defines the size as a blank string variable. And this is for the radio buttons. This part actually takes, that's why that's being defined. Then the label classification goes on the screen. We have the 4 classifications. Then here's where the 5 entry GPAs. And then this one, the message, it really, at this point, needed to be a call after, because there, oh, I remember. What the student intended this to be was just a message field for the student or the teacher to put a comment in there. He didn't do it the same as what I wanted to happen is for when you click the message button for then it to display either Dean's List or probation. But he left it as an entry field that he writes out to his text file. Then the button is clicked the save. And when you do, the command equals save. So that means it's going to jump to the function called save. And this GPA.get, you can either do that or you can change that GPA into a string because it has to be a string before you can put it into a float. And so that's what they did here. Because when it comes in as an entry, it's not a string. I'm not sure how it classifies it. Okay, then we created the calculation to calculate the average, then opened the file grade report, then put the title, class, and then size.get, which was what he called that field with the radio buttons. Then there's the final GPA, average, message.get. So if they type something in, that's written to the file. And then the final GPA right here is put in a variable named final. And then that final.pack finals put out to the screen. And then Dean equals, then he's set up 2 constants here with the messages. And then he does his test just like from the last program, the last test that we had. And then I added this else no message so we know for sure that it went through it. Then we delete all those fields and that's the end. Okay, so we're going to run it here. And we see the screen, the window was created. I can put in Wilson, Junior, and 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, tab, 3.8, tab. And then I can put in test 4 or whatever message I want, click the save button, and it did print out GPA 3.6 Dean's List, which is correct. And if I want to go over and see what it created, here's my grade report text. Created class junior GPA 3.60, which is the average, and then the message that was in there. So it actually didn't write everything to that, didn't write the message Dean's List, but that's that one, that's what how it would write out, which we would see. I had requested on the test document, I closed that you actually put in that grades.txt file, student name, classification, 5 GPAs, the average, and the message. So the only thing that was missed there actually was this, because he called the message a note that you did. I intended it to be the Dean's, the message that you printed out for them. Okay, since there's no one here to ask questions, I'm going to go on to the next. and go over it quickly, and then we will be this one actually now this one that I'm going to show you the T4 answer. What are you getting?
Huh?
What are you getting? I'm doing it on one thing.
Oh, trying to find the file.
Okay. Okay, so the last one, we go here, Google Drive. Okay. With this one, you'll be able to see the difference is that it's really more modularized, which is what your requirement really is going to be for your final. It'll be this program, but I'll have you add an object, and then you will make sure everything is in functions, and this main part of the program should just kind of be a summary execute of functions. So you would be able to look at it and tell what's going on. Like this one is creating the screen all the way down to here, actually here. And then when you click the button, enter GPA, it's going to add it according to this function up here. It's going to create, he created a file with the 5 GPAs in it, because whenever you push the enter GPA button, it's going to add one, and then you can add the second, third. And in this case, we can only add 5 because that's what he's calculating the average on. And there would be another way to code that. Also, one of the problems he was saying that he had with this is that you couldn't run it again unless you delete the file, because you could only run it once, and then those fields already have something in it. There are ways to do that. Okay, so in this program, it's very modular. You come down, you create your window, you enter the GPAs, and you use this function to do that. And then when you click save, the only thing I would have done maybe would been to put the display message function call, but it was okay the way this was done too, because he actually called it within a function. So that's called a local function, which we'll really talk about in chapter 10. So on the save student, sets up the array, opens the GPA file, reads in the array, splits each one off into the array with his semicolon, where that's what he did when he read them in. Then he calculates the average, then opens the student data text file and adds these fields to it. And then at the end, he calls display message average. So he's going to pass average, which was calculated here, into the function display message, and it's going to pick it up here. So that's something to always remember. If you're passing a parameter, then you have to also put one in the function that's receiving it. Then final would be the final GPA average, and there he tests to see if it's less than 5. Or 3.5, if it's greater than 3.5, it is, if it's greater than 3.5, Dean's List, and so forth. Then when it finishes that, it returns that message here from, or it actually prints it to the screen right here inside the display message. Okay, and then we will be done. And there's the app main loop. So I'm going to go up here and run it and show you how it works. Okay, so now I can take my All right, senior. I put 3.3 and hit the enter button. 3.5, hit the enter button. 2.0. I think that was 5, hopefully. And then I click save, and it gives me my GPA, and it says no message because it's not below 2.0. So there we go. And you'll notice how, if you look at over here, that it did create a student GPA for all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I actually entered 6, and it divided by 5. So but it only read in the first 5 because the way I have the variables are set up. But then student data text, name, D. Wilson, classification senior, but he didn't list out the GPA. So he didn't write everything to the file that was requested, but he did get it looking pretty good with the enter GPA button. That was a good job. Okay, so if there's anything on these that you don't understand, you can email me. I can possibly hang out another time this week. But for right now, you need to be sure and look at the lecture that I'll be doing on Thursday. I will cover chapter 10 on Thursday. We will have a reading quiz over the weekend over chapter 10, as we've been having all semester. But I won't meet my lecture class next week until Thursday. And so that's when we will schedule your hangout. Will be Thursday, May the 14th at our class time, and it will be in that classroom. And so I need y'all to take a look at it at the Evernote and make sure you understand everything that's in there and what I'm saying to do. And so please be sure and email me and let me know if you need help. I'm relocated into HE305A. So when you come down the hall, if you need to see me, you go all the way after you get off the elevator to your right, and you'll see a door that says 305B. Well, you have to go into that door to get into my office door. So just let me know how I can be of help. Thank you. Where did that go? Hopefully